welcome back to the Decarb Connect podcast. This week, I'm really pleased to be joined by David Boyd, who's a strategic advisor to Carbon Ray, who've been both friend and client to Decarb Connect over the last year. And we're going to be having a talk about how changes in the carbon market, particularly in Europe, may really revolutionise how cement production and innovation works over the next few years. So I'm going to dive straight in and just ask David, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us a bit about how you've arrived at this point in time where this is the kind of thing that you're focusing on?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Alex. God, my career history and journey is somewhat convoluted to this stage, so I'll try and keep it relatively brief. Actually, my first job was working nights for London Underground on track maintenance. I would go down I did it for about 18 months, changing the track, railway lines, sleepers. I then got into the steel industry after university, after I'd done a degree in mechanical engineering. I became a plant engineer and got really interested in how management decisions are made. You know, you can be an engineer and have a great technical solution, but actually how does a decision get made? So I ended up spending about 15 years in mergers and acquisitions, doing kind of operations due diligence on industrial plants for private equity firms beforehand, and then sticking around and integrating it afterwards. Bringing it back slightly to decarbonisation, the first time it really, I suppose, piqued my interest was when I was working in advertising. I was responsible for taking digital billboards and assets, paper billboards and traditional billboards, and turning them digital, putting a digital screen in. And we were really interested in the carbon impact of that. So yeah, obviously there's a carbon cost about the technology you're putting in, but what we're saving in cars, what we're saving in the paper we're using. And it was just impossible to do the analysis because there's no real good data on the real full life cycle impact of paper. And this was, 5-10 years ago. That took me on to a data business, which I worked for more recently, and we were working on the processing of the drug safety issues that come from taking your medicines. And so COVID exploded. We got into AI. We were looking at implementing AI to suddenly deal with the implications of a mass rollout of a vaccine. So I'm kind of working in AI and working that through. And I suppose I got really, really interested in the stage we're at, where actually, because of the combination of AI and of carbon, we're actually rethinking and re-engineering basic fundamental processes in the steel industry and gas in cement. And that's the kind of thing that doesn't happen very often. You know, these things haven't changed in hundreds of years, and now we're fundamentally rethinking how we do them. So it was just an exciting time, and I jumped at the opportunity to work with the Carbon Ray guys.
I love that. One of the things I'm really enjoying about the podcast is actually that the range of backgrounds that people bring with them. And I think in part, especially when you're talking to people who are on the disruptor side of the fence, and sometimes in the finance side of the fence as well, in part, you're getting this variety because people have just, gravitated to decarbonisation as their own awareness of climate and their role in it, their ability to influence it, is sort of coming to the fore. And I just love it. I love the variety of skills and experiences that people are bringing.
Definitely. And I think, we all think as individuals about our own personal impact, whether we're flying or taking the train, driving or cycling. And actually, if you think you've got a skill set you could use and that has a more widespread impact in terms of, fundamentally changing some of the things that humanity does, it's brilliant, and it makes you feel better about maybe, driving occasionally or getting the odd flight.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's dive into our theme of choice. And I think it's really interesting. We'll talk a little bit about the white paper that you've developed on this topic. It's interesting to be talking to ostensibly a technology company about the state of play in the European trading scheme. And yeah, I'm kind of interested in how did you guys come to decide to write this white paper? And then we'll go into the state of play in the ETS and so forth.
Sure. I suppose it's a little bit about that kind of management decision making that I was explaining before. Is for our technology to be useful and applied, we really need to understand how the industries work and how they tick. And you take something like carbon pricing, which on the front, is really simple. There's a price, €80 a ton. You pay it, you get the benefit. Actually, when you get into the detail about how it's applied to each industry, you get some really weird things happening. And I suppose as a technology business, we need to understand those so we can best help our clients. Cement production is classic for this and brilliant in that the way it's been applied to the industry is, first of all, you get free allowances if you're an existing producer. But those free allowances are based on the amount of clinker you produce. So clinker is this, fundamental material that goes into the cement, and the cement's used for the concrete. And it is the root cause of the emissions, because you basically have to heat the limestone up to 1500 degrees, so massive energy use. And suddenly you're saying, actually, the more you produce of this material, the more free allowances you get. So you start getting this reverse incentive to actually, cement producers have been incentivized to produce more and more clinker. In the rest of the world, you don't have that incentive. And so they use less clinker in their cement, which means that their cement is more environmentally friendly than it is on average in Europe. So a really weird way that you take something which is a good policy decision, implement it in the industry, and you have this perverse outcome of actually increasing emissions. I suppose that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, and another example of how policies are implemented around the capacity question. So if you take a cement producer, the rules say you have to be producing at least 50% of your capacity, producing up to 50% of your capacity. That means that some of these less good plants that would be operating at 30, 40% have an incentive to increase their production to meet the 50%. So following the introduction of the ETS schemes, Europe's actually now become a net exporter of cement because everyone's rushing to produce more. So that's why we really got into the policy, to understand what these things are doing, and therefore how do our solutions best help cement producers.
When you talk about this with clients, like what's the kind of the mood music or the sentiment that they bring to it? How do those conversations go?
So I think they are equally frustrated sometimes about how these things play out. It's really, really encouraging how they see, the people I've spoken to talk about how carbon pricing is a force for good. Fundamentally, their clients, who to a large extent actually go to governments for large infrastructure projects buying cement, are very cost focused. And so that ability to innovate and put in products that are greener on the market and cost a little bit more just isn't there, because nobody's buying it, nobody's willing to pay more. And so this is a force for good for them that allows them to become greener and emit less carbon. And also it's trying to be something really fair, so the whole industry has to play by the same rules, and that's the key thing, is they just want fairness in terms of making sure that what they have to do, other people have to do as well. I suppose the final point, actually, just think about it, is time. So fairness and time. So if you think about an industry like cement, the timescales for making changes and innovating and investing in hardware and changing your business model can be significant. You're making investments for decades. So giving them time and signaling to say what's coming next is another really important factor.
Yeah, I find that the kind of the issues around how long it would take to introduce new ways of working is often the thing that people on the outside of foundation industries just really don't have a feel for. Most people's connection to manufacturing is the kind of high-tech, fast-moving manufacturing where, investments, if they ever talk about it, if they ever hear about it, are a much shorter cycle. But the idea, I remember when I was first starting decarb, someone from the cement sector actually said to me, we have at best 1.5 investment cycles to really make the impact that we need, i.e. that's 25, 30 years of 1.5 investment cycles.
Yes.
And I just thought that was quite a sort of, whoa, profound.
It is. And I think as individuals and governments, we lose that focus because we're so, a new iPhone comes out every year and we've only been using smartphones for 20 years. But actually a blast furnace campaign is 20 years. So, you are making investments that can last 20 years. If those policies and structures and incentives aren't in place now, you've missed that opportunity through to 2050.
Okay, well, we'll actually come back to what the EU, the kind of potential changes on horizon are. I'm just going to, you and I, before we came on air, had sort of talked about and maybe using a live example. But why don't we look at that first? So, okay. I know in the white paper you'd mapped out, what are companies making from these free credits at the moment, and therefore what's at risk to them with the changes from regulation, and we'll dig into those changes as well. Yeah. But just paint that picture for us.
So at the moment, you do have listed cement producers in Europe actually able to sell excess credits and making significant amounts of money. So there's a global cement producer that just in the last 12 months overall globally made a profit of around $700 million from dollars from their cement production, of which 600 million was from selling excess credits. So there are some big numbers at play. What I'd say is that there are policy questions around the finance area that make it difficult for them and difficult to work out exactly what's going on in the industry. So at the moment, all those free allowances that are issued to cement producers, for example, or in other sectors equally, they're issued as they're free, and they're accounted for in the accounts of the businesses as free. So actually, you have no idea from looking at a business whether or not it has a balance of billions of dollars of credits that are sitting on the books or none at all. So it could be equally possible there are cement producers out there which are worth more in the credits they're holding that have been free issued to them than they are actually as a business from cement producers. So you've got some quite strange things going on. What's happening to them as a company? I think when you look at the cement industry and steel industry, they're not making enough money from their core business to be able to absorb the cost of paying for carbon credits when they have to start paying for them. If you look at, I did an example of an Irish cement producer called CRH. They're about 31 billion revenue totally globally, of which 5 billion is cement production. So their emissions are of the order of 20 million tons of net CO2 emissions equivalent every year, of which 70% are in Europe. And you apply a price of 80 euros per ton to that, then you're talking about 1.2 billion euros of cost from carbon taxes, as and when free allowances go. And there just aren't the profits in the whole business to kind of cover that. So it has to go to be passed on to consumers of cement, and the same will happen in steel and glass, but we'll see the costs going up. And I suppose this is all happening at a time where the fundamental costs are changing as well. If you look at the cost of coal, which is key fuel for still a lot of cement producers, that's gone up in price from $80 a ton to $400 a ton as a result of the Ukraine conflict. So this isn't an easy time if you're in a foundation industry.
No, to put it mildly, and with spiking gas prices as well, it's there's the kind of the ability to find other choices or make other choices is restricted. But coming back to something you were saying in sort of towards the beginning of that example, kind of the point of what we're talking about today is that these free credits are going to start to disappear, and that then leads to a necessary change, we hope, and we expect, in behavior and investments and the kind of technologies and innovations that may be used. But just in addition to those emissions credits kind of decreasing over time, what other kind of changes are you seeing on the horizon, or that do you perceive are going to have an impact from the ETS? Or is that the primary? I think,
well, I suppose the key change is the free allowances going, and that's enabled by something called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. So effectively what that means is that it creates an equal playing field, that people who import cement or steel or glass into the European Union have to pay the same price as if you'd have produced it locally. So because of that, you're getting rid of the need to protect producers within Europe. And that means you can get rid of free allowances, which also have all these perverse incentives associated with them. So that will mean that actually you no longer need to keep plants operating at 50%. You can suddenly start to reduce the amount of clinker you put into your cement. You can suddenly start to innovate in different ways in cement production, because the structure that reinforced the existing systems is removed. So this removal of the carbon border adjustment mechanism is really, really important. The uncertainty is timing, when it starts to go out, be implemented, and when it finishes. There are so many dates out there. It's really interesting. So when we started writing the white paper, people were talking about 2036, maybe 2030, and then it became 2022, then 2026. It really came forward. And that's people saying, actually, this is something we can do. We can do it now. We can do it safely. Let's make it happen, because there are so many positives from it. At the same time, politics come in, and actually recently, there was just last week, quite an interesting session of the European Parliament where it was kicked out and it was pushed back. So exactly what the timing is of this change is the really big question, but it's definitely the number one thing that's going to change and impact producers.
And then the other kind of, well, hopefully positive change, but also slightly unknowable in terms of how quickly it will start to have an impact, is the kind of the push that I guess the UN through the Industrial Development Organization, they have this push on green procurement through government, which will largely be, I think it will largely or mostly be focused on cement and steel, and obviously other green buyers. What's your sense of, how are clients looking at that? How are they, do they see that as something that's going to have quite a speedy impact or not?
I think that positively, definitely. If you can change the procurement policies to actually incentivize procuring better product, fantastic, and it gives them the the initiative and the benefit from innovating, which is what they're looking for. I suppose the challenge is always, as these are political discussions, exactly what the timing is and how it will be implemented creates that uncertainty for them. And so the sooner we can make it clear exactly what the structures are and how it's going to be implemented, that would be fantastic. I think one of the complicating factors with all these kind of foundation industries is things like standards, civil engineering standards, and they are slow to evolve, and there's definitely a degree of risk to changing them quickly. And so I suppose I'm always naturally cautious about how quickly we're going to see that change because of the safety aspect around these fundamental materials.
Okay, so this white paper and this discussion we're having, I mean, obviously, Carbon Ray is a technology company, not a policy advisory. So that's the scene setting. That's the sort of, that's the story of the market that's going on. Let's sort of turn our attention then to one of the kind of natural follow-ons, which is once these credits go, once these dynamics start shifting, there will need to be different types of technologies and portfolios of technologies that come into play. So what's the story there, and where does Carbon Ray itself kind of play into that?
Sure. So there are lots of different routes to making these foundation industries, and particularly cement, greener. The easy one that we're slightly further ahead in Europe than elsewhere is switching to alternative fuels from coal. That's about 70% complete in Europe in terms of substitution, much lower in other regions. You've got carbon capture and storage. People are talking about green hydrogen, and the more conceptual ideas such as using graphene in cement production, in concrete production to really increase the strength. The challenge with all of them is that scalability question. How quickly can you do this, and can you do this everywhere quickly? And that's what is really interesting about what we've built at Carbon Ray, in that effectively there is enough variation, there's enough complexity in how cement is produced, that actually using an AI system to manage the production settings can deliver significant savings in terms of fuel, and even better savings in terms of carbon. If you just think that, and the reason that is you think cement production must be something we know very well. There's such variation in the input raw materials and the fuel, combined with the actual hardware that's being used, that it's actually a really, really complex process that you can't expect a human to actually manage. And they're managing not just the complex inputs, but the complex requirements. What's the throughput, what's the quality, how much fuel are you using, what are our objectives for the day. So finding that balance, actually we've got an AI system that's able to find the optimum settings. So effectively what it does, it reduces the fuel use by about 8%, and because of the way we can look at the fuel, actually we can reduce the carbon impact by about 20%. It's cloud-based, so you can roll that out globally to every single cement plant pretty quickly, really quickly. And that's what's really exciting me, is yes, I think with engineering standards and procurement policies and materials innovation, I'm excited to see what things are going to look like in 20, 30 years time. But actually there are some solutions now we can roll out that will have that kind of impact.
I know within our membership base, we often, we tend to talk about it in, I guess, slightly simplified terms of what's the short-term win versus what's long-term. And this sits in that short-term comparatively piece of, well, not only is it making that difference on your CO2 output, but bluntly right now, cost is everything. And that fuel reduction that ability to cut cost as well as your CO2 output. We see people looking at all kinds of technologies, from the widget through to highly sophisticated software, that in different ways play to that same tune, if you like.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And this is, I suppose, the fundamental element of all of the decarbonisation work that we do, is that portfolio of different solutions we need to work on in terms of time and scalability, and then also working on the demand and kind of rethinking value chains and rethinking the fundamentals of materials at the same time. And it's only when we put that whole portfolio together that we can actually start to, feel like we can achieve the targets we set ourselves.
So for Carbon Ray itself, then, what stage is the business at? I mean, obviously we at Decarb know you and the team well. It's kind of been exciting, even just in the last few months, to see the kind of gains you've been making. But just paint the picture for people listening about the stage of development that you're at.
Sure. So a lot of our development actually was before Carbon Ray was established. So in the University of Cambridge and UCL's AI team, building these capabilities. Since we've been set up over the last year, the focus has been really the core development of what we're building for the cement industry. We're at the point that's there, it's established. So we've switched to the global scaling of the product, rolling it out across India, Southeast Asia, US, so to try and get that scalable impact as quickly as we can. Which means that from a development point of view, we're now moving on to other industries such as steel and glass, starting to look at the data sets, starting to look at, blast furnaces, electric arc furnaces, and then effectively take the same core technologies and apply it to the different data sets to get similar results.
Yeah, and I as you're talking, I'm wondering, like, does the nature of your technology, like how did the discussions about machine learning and AI go down? Like, is there a good degree of understanding of what that means amongst the prospect base, or what's the nature of those conversations at first?
Yes, I think certainly myself, and I know when I was in industry and as approached by people with new technologies, whether it was AI or something else, I always had a natural skepticism to say, okay, yes, there's a technical capability, a possibility, but how developed is it? And is it really, do you understand this industry and understand what we're trying to achieve? So I was in their position a few years ago. And actually, I think what's great is everyone's open to the possibility of, okay, we want to listen, we want to see. And it's getting just our ability to demonstrate those benefits of what we've achieved in the pilot plants and where we've launched, actually then really gives them confidence that it's achievable and we can do it now. So I think the media, I suppose, there's something called the Gartner's hype cycle. Where you hear about all these amazing things and then it goes into this trough where actually nothing really happens for a while, whether it's virtual reality or any other kind of technology. And so I think the problem we've got is that AI does fall into that category of, yes, it's interesting, but is there really any substance behind it? And there is. I suppose what's quite interesting is ourselves and our lives, AI is being used, but we're starting to ignore it, whether it's in social media platforms or on route planning or, insurance risk-based decisions. AI is being used all over the place and it's starting to be just happening under the radar.
Mm. And then, so for you and the team, what does the next year look like? So you've got pilot studies, or you've got
yes. So we're live. The platform's in use. So yeah, I was going to say going around the world, obviously not flying. We'll be doing our best to reduce our carbon impact, but just getting that global spread and getting it into as many cement plants as possible over the next 12 months, and then building out the similar models and piloting in steel and the glass industry. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how quickly we can adapt it to the other sectors, and then where we can go from there. It's not just a kind of a single step. We do this and we deliver the benefit, and there are, the benefit comes immediately, but then it creates that kind of platform to say, okay, we've got this technology, it's delivering this benefit, what can we do with it now, where can it go? That's going to be really interesting, working with the industry and the cement producers and steel producers to see what comes next.
Well, I know I'll be seeing, hopefully you, but certainly the rest of the team in Amsterdam next week. If anyone listening want some more information either about Carbon Ray or this white paper that we've been discussing, I'll put some links in the show notes. I'll make sure I get those from David before I release him back to the real world. And yeah, but if you're in Amsterdam, come and say hello, and I'll be happy to introduce you to the team at Carbon Ray as well.
Fantastic.
Great, David, thanks so much for giving us this time and a really useful white paper. So I'll look forward to sharing that and hope you get some good feedback from it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alex. It's lovely talking to you.
Many thanks for listening to the Decarb Connect podcast. We work with clients across the industrial sectors, specifically those who are tasked with decarbonising the most energy intensive products and materials that we use every day. If you have an interest in learning more about either our members network, our reports, or our event series, do get in touch with us at decarbconnect.com. Or if you'd like to take part in the podcast, email me, Alex, at ac@decarbconnect.com. Thanks for listening.